Welcome to all of our guests who are here this morning to help celebrate African Heritage Month with all of us. There are a lot of honored guests and members of the community, and so on behalf of the council, I welcome you to our community here in Rockville. These celebrations and commemorations are just so really important because they show everybody the beautiful fabric of our community. And here in Montgomery County, we are fortunate to be home of the most diverse communities in the entire country. And that includes so many of our neighbors and friends who've chosen to move here from the African continent. And within the immigrant community here in Montgomery County, African immigrants actually make up 16%. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to celebrate you during this month and to thank you for helping make our community strong, making it culturally diverse, and just helping participate in our civic and political life as well. And so with that, I just want to say thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to a number of my colleagues, and we will start with Councilmember Will Jawando.
Thank you, President Glass, and happy African Heritage Month to everyone who's here, and to my colleagues and to residents of Montgomery County. And we know it can be difficult to come in the middle of the day on a Tuesday morning, but we appreciate those who made it out here. And we're going to be celebrating all month. We've been celebrating all month. In true African tradition, it's going to be a long, drawn out and an exciting party. And you know, as Council President mentioned, you know, we have one of the best things about our county is our diversity, and it's really vast. And within the African community, it's vast. We have every part of the continent of Africa represented, you know, many in this room, but also out in our community. And it's an awesome thing. There's a Nigerian Yoruba proverb that I often, you know, tell my kids and talk about. However far a stream flows, it never forgets its origins. And that's really important. And I try to remember it myself. And I think as Americans who have chosen to be in America, we can never forget our origins. And that's so important for our community, especially because they're diverse origins. They come from different parts of the continent and the world. They come with struggle, with progress, with joy, with pain. But we all come together. I've talked about my dad, Olayinka Jawando, quite a bit this month, and he passed away 6 years ago, but he immigrated to this country in 1968 in the midst of two global wars, the Vietnam War and the Biafran Civil War in Nigeria. And America welcomed him. It wasn't easy. Got a scholarship to school. He dealt with discrimination. He struggled with depression. But he persevered, and America had a place for him. He would never go back home. One of the things we always talk about in the African community is everyone's just coming here for a little while, and then we're going back. But we make wherever we are our home, and that's what he did. And that's also a part of the American story. There's so many folks from the African diaspora that have come here fleeing violence, seeking opportunity, looking for refuge, looking for better educational outcomes, success for their families. And that too is a uniquely part of the American story from folks from other places. Africans have brought their traditions to this country and have been here since before the founding of this country, obviously. We held a commemoration a few years ago when I was first elected to the council, commemorating the 400 years since 1619, when the first documented enslaved Africans were brought to this country. And one of the things I loved about that, we had great food then too, and we'll have some today. We had the diverse African diaspora community represented here in all of the various strains, whether you came here, you know, 50 years ago, 10 years ago, or several hundred years ago, we had those strands connected. And while the Ethiopian community, and I see my good brother Solomon here, is the number one immigrant community in the African immigrant community in this region. We are strongly represented with West Africa and Southern Africa as well, and we have really, really strong ties. I'm wearing traditional clothing today. You'll see it when we stand up and do stuff the other day. I got to do that when we were sworn in 2019, or 2018 rather, and I was scared to do it. I've told this story, and I had conversations with some of my big brothers and big sisters. I see Reverend Kennedy here, who always proudly wears his traditional clothing. But I was scared to do it in a space where it had never been worn before. And when I did it, I immediately knew it was the right thing to do. Immigrants from all other parts of the world came up and said to us, you know, Chinese immigrants, Indian American immigrants, certainly African immigrants, saying, thank you for just representing part of the culture that you've brought to make Montgomery County a great place. And now it's not a big deal. And I try to do it in council sessions sometimes too. Councilmember Katz always waiting to see what I'm going to wear. and you know, Councilmember Mink was able to do that, and with the Chinese American dress that she wore. And now it's normal, and that's what it should be. We can be fully African and fully American, and we don't have to check it at the door, or whatever your heritage is. And yeah, sure. And part of that is celebrating our great diversity, and not just celebrating it, but making sure everyone here has a place and has access to resources and opportunity, and their kids can succeed. I always think of my good friend Jay Rubanda, who's here, who has worked harder than anybody. No one has worked harder than him to make sure that the African community has had a place at the table. Moomin Bari, I'm gonna get in trouble and start naming people, but there are so many people here that have dedicated their lives to that, and it's a great thing, because you know it's tough. A lot of these countries, my dad's story was tough. So many of our stories have been tough. Our countries are dealing with things right now on the continent of Africa, and it's tough for many of us. But it's great to be in a place where we can celebrate each other and keep our rich history and culture alive, because the stronger we are here, the stronger we are all across the diaspora. So happy African Heritage Month, and I can't wait to show you guys this video and see some of the great people who are contributing to the tapestry of Montgomery County. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. I'll turn it over to Councilmember Sales.
All right. Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much. Well, good morning. It's still morning. Thank you so much for everyone being here today, and honored to be able to bring remarks as well. Today's America is rooted in African ancestry, culture, customs, and traditions. From the Middle Passage that resulted in the enslavement of Africans to today. Their rich tapestry and incredible sacrifices have shaped our nation for centuries. America has a long, complicated legacy of working with African nations, from leaders like Nnamdi Azikiwe to Nelson Mandela to Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Yet, I am sure that our country and our county are better off today because of the countless contributions that the African diaspora has made to our culture. Earlier this year in February, I was honored to visit South Africa as a part of the 2023 Sister Cities International Africa Summit, the first of its kind, designed to strengthen and increase the number of U.S. Africa sister cities within the Sister Cities International Network. The beauty of the country was overwhelming. The people there are so full of energy, hope, and promise, despite having triumphed over so many different experiences from us in this country, particularly regarding the education system. I remember witnessing firsthand how so many schools did not have access to basic teaching materials, books. I participated in a book drive so students could have new books with pictures and stories that reflected themselves. For those familiar with the original BRIC block of countries, the addition of South Africa in 2010, which brought the S to BRIC, made it a community representing about 40% of the world's population and around 25% of a global economy seeking a new financial niche devoid of Western influence. Now, 13 years later, leaders of the BRICS group have invited 6 more countries to join their alliance, and 2 of the 6 are African countries, Egypt and Ethiopia. I hope that this year for African Heritage Month, we too can make a call to action for us to cooperate more with African leaders and Africans in our local communities and on a global scale. Invest in countries across the African continent that are rich in resources that the world needs to thrive. As the first African American woman elected countywide to the council member at large position, the significance of this moment is not lost on me. It is an honor to stand here on the shoulders of our ancestors with my fellow brother in the diaspora, Councilmember Jawando, and Council President Glass, and the rest of my colleagues too. We're all a part of the diaspora, as well as so many community advocates, community leaders in this body to proclaim September as African Heritage Month. Thank you, and I look forward to celebrating with you all.
We all are immigrants from somewhere, yes. So now we have a beautiful video that we are about to show, and before the video is shown, I want to give credit to Merche Salou. I see you back there. And Joe Thompson for putting together this beautiful tribute. Thank you both. And so with that, let's go to the movies.
Known as the cradle of civilization, Africa is home to a wide range of cultures, languages, and history. This mosaic of cultural diversity and history was brought to the United States through African immigrants who settled in their second home. According to the Pew Research Center, as of 2022, there are over 3 million African immigrants, representing 54 different countries, living in the United States. This African Heritage Month, I will introduce you to 5 African changemakers who are redefining culture and community by proudly showcasing their rich African traditions through their diverse professions, bringing the past to the present in a vibrant celebration of heritage and identity. African dance and music are a mesmerizing fusion of rhythm, storytelling, and community spirit, embodying centuries of tradition, expression, and joyous celebration. Carib Fit encapsulates the essence of African heritage and creativity, intertwining the vibrant hues of African traditions with graceful dance movements.
4, 3, 2, push it out.
Hailing from a multicultural family, founder and owner Neki Nete was determined to find a career path that would allow her to express the cultures she grew up embracing.
My mother with her Caribbean heritage and my father with his Ghanaian heritage, just combining that, our house was a cultural mixing pot, and it was beautiful. I was always involved in anything related to my culture, from dance events to carnivals to any type of cultural celebrations. Everything just helps to create who I am today.
Born and raised in Tacoma Park,
Nikki was raised in a family that cherished their cultural heritage and embraced a healthy lifestyle.
It was kind of natural when I chose a profession that involved health and my love for dance.
And in 2015, Nikki opened the doors to Carib Fit in Silver Spring with the goal to help her community stay fit while learning their culture.
There were no classes like this at all. There was nobody doing anything that was dance fitness related with using soca music, using the different genres of African music. When we aren't able to see ourselves as beacons of health, then it's important for us to be able to have a place that we can come and we can move, we can embrace our culture as well as incorporating health. All the movements that we do are centered and grounded in the cultural connections, the cultural dance styles that our ancestors did, things that were brought from Africa to the Caribbean and here in the States as well. It comes from the connection of our culture that has transcended generations. So many people, especially people of African descent, feel like their culture has been lost. They feel like things have been stripped away from them. So to be able to connect and regain what we thought may have been lost is so powerful.
African food and spices have always reflected the continent's rich culinary diversity and the use of unique herbs and seasonings that add depth and character to each dish. Ingeniously infusing Ethiopian culinary traditions with a modern flair, visionary business owner Sihon Belleta has unlocked a new realm of flavors and dining experiences.
As you go, you start to think, the Mediterranean have pita and then they turn it to pita chips. The Mexican have tortilla, they turn it to tortilla chips. The Chinese have the noodle, they turn it to noodle chips. The paratha, the Indian, the same thing. So why is it that our staple bread, which is injera, cannot be converted to chips? So let me try it. This is how it's cut and dried. Injera, usually we eat it fresh, like the first day, and then that's it, right? So I say this injera is okay, it's not bad. It doesn't go bad like for 4 days. Of course, it doesn't have preservatives. So I said I have to learn to do something about it. So during downtime in the restaurant, I started experimenting.
While still operating her Ethiopian restaurant in Rockville, Sihon got to work.
Washing the lentils. This is an ethnic food. So I use the seasoning that we use for making our stew, our kutfo, our tips, and dorowet.
Sihon eventually added lentil and yellow split pea dips, stew mixes, and Berbere blend sauces to Sihona food products.
Together with the injera crisp, I kind of came out like, we need something to eat it. So hummuses are made with chickpeas. So I said, our lentil is delicious. Why not, use the crisp with our lentil?
Sihona Foods products are in many chain markets, like Whole Foods, Mom's Organic, Roadman's, and many others. And Sihon hopes to keep expanding their reach. Africans have also embraced the land, nurturing vibrant farms that produce the authentic flavors of their countries that their communities once longed for but could not find.
A lot of virtue and patience, you need that.
Tanya Dokas Panda predominantly cultivates crops native to South and West Africa, specifically vegetables that flourished in the backyard of her childhood home in Harare, Zimbabwe.
It's the best type of corn that we are used to bake in Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwean corn, also known as maize, is a staple crop of the country's agricultural and food culture.
This is the type of corn most people from Africa are used to. So it gets very popular with a lot of people. They start asking for it like in January when it's still cold. Once I started growing that and sharing with my friends and family, they enjoyed it and they would ask for more. So I found that to be a good business opportunity for myself to be able to expand.
She started her farm, Passion to Seed, in 2015 after she was matched with landowners through the Montgomery Countryside Alliance's Land Link program.
There was a new farmer program going on with the Office of Agriculture in conjunction with Montgomery Countryside Alliance. So I was matched to this landowner here. That made it much easier to start off from nowhere.
And it's not just any land.
Former slaves used to farm this piece of land. And for me to be able to come from Africa and be farming on the same piece of land, it's like a continuation of the historical background that lies on this piece of property.
Although thick kernel African-based corn is what she specializes in, Tanya also grows other popular African crops, like pumpkin leaves, which are used to make mubura, a traditional African dish, corned melons, also known as kiwano, mustard greens, and okra.
I decided to call it Passion to Seed Gardening because I found the passion within me to be able to want to do this.
Passion and work that is not easy, but meaningful. African educators have also passionately dedicated themselves to promoting African languages and history.
We're gonna do what we do first, reading.
Professor Piokush Leminyandu teaches his native language, isiZulu, a Southern Bantu language of the Nguni branch spoken in Southern Africa at Howard University.
I funded basically a huge chunk of my PhD studies through my language Zulu. So that got me curious. Why is Zulu becoming popular in America?
African languages hold the key to unlocking the intricate narratives, wisdom, and distinct perspectives that shape the vibrant mosaic of cultures across the continent.
This Zulu program here at Howard is the largest Zulu program outside of South Africa. There's a lot that can be said about the confidence of students in their self, in their ability to learn an African language, and they see this connecting to their career. Now let's repeat it with confidence. Go.
Professor Leminyandu's classes are special. They go beyond just teaching the language.
So when you're in Southern Africa, you most likely find a chameleon in an ubukwebezane bush, right? So the chameleon likes it. Culture is always part of any language learning. They need to fall in love with the culture or some aspect of the culture, and then the language follows. Even if they don't become fluent in an African language, they become culturally competent, and that's a huge difference maker in whatever career they are going into. This is how we keeping it simple. If it's complicated, it's most likely going to be wrong.
Building lasting bridges between the US and Africa, while equipping his students with the skills they need to cross them.
Zombie no go kill unless you tell them to kill.
A decade after the first production wrapped, Fela, the award-winning musical, is back on stage once again, and this time in Montgomery County at the Olney Theater Center.
Everybody you say Ayakata.
The musical captures the electrifying spirit of Nigerian Afrobeat legend Fela Kuti, bringing his music and story to life.
And the second election all in Nigeria.
From his pioneering Afrobeat sound, fearless social activism, and unapologetic commitment to challenging political injustices, Fela Kuti is a legend for all of Africa.
Everybody say yeah, yeah.
Sierra Leone-born actor Dwayne Richmond plays the role of Fela.
Zombie!
He had played the role on Broadway a decade prior.
It's always a blessing to step in front of people and on the stage and tell Fela's story because it's such an inspiring story. I've been doing the concert, singing his music ever since, we stopped doing the Broadway production, but I've never actually told the full story. So to do it 10 years later and just allowing just the spirit of him to just take over, it's been exciting.
Co-produced by Roundhouse and Olney Theater Center, the musical set in 1978 in Lagos, Nigeria, is framed as Fela's farewell concert at the Africa Shrine, focusing more on Fela's music and dancing.
This production is a little bit more an ensemble piece. When I first did the show, the original Broadway production, the Fela character does a lot of speaking, but in this production, Fela is dancing.
Dwayne also noted that the enthusiastic audience in Montgomery County made performing live on stage every day a joyous experience.
I've spent a lot of time in DC, but never here in Montgomery County. This has been one of my favorite theaters to be at. The community here is just very, very, very engaging and just loving, and they really have embraced Fela.
Dwayne takes immense pride in his African heritage and uses his acting to depict his continent's stories.
As an African growing up in America, there was a time in my life where I didn't want to be from Africa. As I started to get older, it became, the most prized possession in my life. Like, I wouldn't change, being from the motherland for anything in the world. For me, if I can tell our story through theater, that's what I want to do.
While Dwayne continues to spread the African stories, the spirit of Fela Kuti will live on for generations to come.
Everybody say yeah, yeah.
From the rhythmic beats of dance and music to the tantalizing flavors of the African cuisine and the passion poured into educating African languages and history, these African changemakers have proven that heritage and identity can thrive in every corner of the world.
Thank you, Merche and Joseph, for highlighting all those African change makers. That was beautiful, and wonderfully done to uplift some of our voices here in Montgomery County. And with that, I open up the microphone to hear the voices of our colleagues as well. So colleagues, if you have any comments you'd like to make celebrating African Heritage Month, I welcome you to do so. And we're going to start with Councilmember Albernaz.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. This is one of my favorite times of the year when we have the opportunity to celebrate in such a real and authentic way our cultures here in Montgomery County. I do want to especially thank Councilmember Tawando and Councilmember Sales, their teams, Mershai, and everybody in the community that produced this fantastic video and this wonderful event. I've shared this story before, but my best friend from high school and the best man in my wedding and I in his came from Ghana. His name is Kwabena Akuaje, and we just visited him in Toronto a month ago with our families, and we've stayed best friends for the last 40 years. If I close my eyes, I can still think about going into the Akuaje house and smelling the fufu, the cocoa, and the incredible food and dishes that I was like a home away from home. And I always felt at home in that house because growing up in a Latino house, there's so many similarities between our cultures and communities. The food felt similar. The music felt similar. All of it felt right. And I always felt at home. So thank you all again for celebrating this critically important day and month. And we look forward to honor and recognizing all of the contributions of our African community, not just this month, but every day of every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And happy African American Heritage Month to all. And I too want to begin by thanking Councilmember Jawando and Councilmember Sales for today's celebration. Councilmember Jawando also looks to see what I'm wearing every time too. So I just think that should be noted. And I realize the faster I speak, the closer we get to eating. And I'll keep that in mind. But of all the days we have and the proclamations we celebrate, and we do a lot, thank goodness, I think perhaps, if not the most important, and certainly one of the most important days and months is this one. It brings back an awful lot of memories for me personally. I'm a child of Montgomery County. I was born in Gaithersburg, and you look out into the audience and you see people who, during my lifetime, during your lifetime, actually were the trailblazers for bringing what we have today. I see my friend Vernon Ricks, who I believe was the first African American elected in Montgomery County. From Tacoma Park. It was mentioned by the former mayor from Tacoma Park. And, you know, Vernon, I couldn't get very far without saying that. And my colleagues have heard me say, probably more times than they would ever like, that I went to first grade in 1956, and that was the year that Montgomery County Public Schools integrated. Montgomery County Public Schools were not integrated prior to 1956. During my lifetime, we've seen that. And even though Montgomery County Public Schools were integrated, Montgomery County did not necessarily integrate. There were parts of Montgomery County, Vernon, you know as well as I, there were parts of Montgomery County that didn't integrate. They, you know, in Gaithersburg, there was a movie theater. I remember it vividly. And I had many friends who we went to elementary school together, but we couldn't sit together in the movie theater. The African American young people sat upstairs and we sat downstairs. My lifetime. And there are parts of Montgomery County history that we're all very proud of. But there are parts of Montgomery County's history, whether we're proud of it or not, should not, cannot, and will not get lost in what we've gone through and how far we need to go. And we need to celebrate the good parts, and we need to think about those parts that need to be changed. But my colleagues have all heard me say, I'm a sincere believer that a community is a family. And today, I am proud to celebrate with my family the African American Heritage Month. Thank you very much for allowing me to say a few words.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz. Councilmember Luedtke.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I know this is, we got to hustle because food is priority. And what I'm about to say is to say thank you for always being so willing to share your food, your culture, your music, your history, your stories, your open hearts. Because my experience here in the county, first being in East County, and Jeru, you're like the unofficial mayor of the East County, you know. But no matter who I met, walking the dogs, talking, it would be dinner time, and the smells would come from every different house and different things. And then I'd see them outside gardening, and I get to ask the question, so tell me about why you're doing that, or what's that for? And everybody would always be willing to share, to tell, and there was always a bigger story. If we are only open ourselves to receiving it, and if more of us were only open to receiving it, the universe would be a better place. But I am grateful for all that you do in your communities, and seeing friends out here across the room, and I am very much looking forward to celebrating you today. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Great. Thank you. I just want to thank everyone who came today, the wonderful video that was put together, and for my colleagues, because I think it's so important that we take this time to take a moment, to stop and to truly see each other, and to listen, and to learn from our different experiences, and to come together as a community. And as Councilmember Juando and Councilmember Katz talked about, it's also about looking back. And when my children were in school, they had the privilege of going to Blair High School. And every year, Blair puts on a production called Sankofa. And when I was introduced to this principle, this African principle of Sankofa, I thought it encapsulated so beautifully what we need to do as a community. It's remembering the past so that we can move forward and progress into the future. And I think celebrating months like this, taking this time, allows us to do that. So I thank you all for allowing me to be part of that. Thank you.
Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you, and happy African Heritage Month to everybody here and listening. I live in Germantown. I've been there for 30 years, and with my colleague, Councilmember Katz, both Germantown and Gaithersburg are number 1 and 2, or 2 and 1, of the most diverse communities in the country. And so it's so important, as Councilmember Luedtke mentioned, the sharing that happens from the African community is so wonderful. I've My life has been enriched by being in this community for the past 30 years. But also my daughter was born here, and she's grown up with this loving, caring community. So I thank you. I do want to say that I feel like I know Councilmember Jowando's father from his book. It was such a loving portrayal, and so thank you for sharing that. And I just have to make a shameless plug. Soul in Motion is an African dance troupe from Germantown, and they're opening at Black Rock. The season opener for Black Rock is September 22nd, Soul in Motion, Germantown. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. Thank you to Councilmembers Jawando and Sales for leading us in today's celebration, and to all of you for being here with us to celebrate here, and for that fantastic video. That was, wonderful. Thank you. Always excellent. I am so grateful to represent District 5, where we have such an incredibly diverse African immigrant community. And I especially want to recognize again my friend and a mentor of mine, which I know so many of us can say here on this council, Jeru Bande, who we are truly fortunate to have working with us and for all of us in East County. What I've learned from Jeru is that every food you can think of, despite what you may think, is actually from Gambia. So. So thank you for that, Jeru. And thank you to our diverse African community all across District 5 and across the county for everything that you have done, that they have done and continue to do, that forms so much of the fabric of Montgomery County. Thank you.
Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
As you may know, I was born in South America. I was born in Venezuela. And I grew up in a country where, for us, Africa is the motherland. That's how I grew up. The blood of Africa mixes with the blood of the Amazonians. And that's where I came up. And so I just, you know, when you're raised thinking that way, it just shapes your values and how you act. Many of you know that I was not just on the planning board before I got this gig on the county council, but I had my own company. I had 10 employees doing, you know, work nationwide and internationally. And the name of my company was Matea Group. And a lot of people ask, you know, what's Matea? And I said, well, when I had to name my company, I was working there for almost 16 years. When I wanted to name my company, I wanted to name it for something that really meant for me. As a Venezuelan, Simon Bolivar is like the George Washington for us. And the person who raised Simon Bolivar was La Negra Matea. Matea was his nanny. This is back in the 1800s. And she was a slave. The values that Simon Bolivar learned were thanks to her. She told him that we all the same, no matter what, how you will look like, the color of your skin, we all have the same blood, and the blood comes from Africa. So Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia were all liberated thanks to this man. But the influence that he had was his nanny, a slave named Matea, and that's why I named my company after her. So anyway, I just wanted to share that in memory, you know, commemorating African Heritage Month. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And the final comments will be from Vice President Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am so excited to be here, one of our favorite days of the year, and realize that I am the one standing before the most important part of today, the celebration of food and culture. And I heard earlier about our friend Jeru being the unofficial mayor of East County. We have more than a quorum here. I think we can make it official. So without objection, I hope that we can do that. But when we talk about living our values out loud in Montgomery County, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we talk about the strength of 1/3 of our residents being foreign born. Days like today are what we're talking about. And I am just so excited to be part of a county that was from my understanding, the first county in the United States to recognize this month as African Heritage Month, and what has become a favorite tradition, I think, of many of us, if not all of us, here in this building. And when we talk about Maryland being America in miniature, in so many ways, Montgomery County is the world in miniature, and we take great pride in that. And that pride is really because of you. That pride is because of the arts and culture and food, the entrepreneurship, the family focus, the community engagement. It's so many things that the African diaspora and this incredibly strong and resilient community makes us better. It makes us a more complete community. So thank you for everything that you do for Montgomery County. Thank you for being such an entrenched part of the fabric that runs through the threads of what makes Montgomery County what it is. And thank you to colleagues, Councilmember Jawando, Councilmember Sales. It really is a privilege and an honor to be able to work every day with both of you. And thank you to everybody in our community who makes this such a proud place to serve and such a great place to live.
Thank you, colleagues. There are a few more things we got to get through before lunch. And right now before us, we are going to jointly read the proclamation officially honoring this month as African Heritage Month. So I will kick it off, and then we will rotate amongst all the council members. A proclamation from the Montgomery County Council. Whereas September is African Heritage Month, which recognizes and celebrates African achievement and educates community members about the many cultures across the African diaspora. And
whereas Montgomery County is the first county in the nation to proclaim the month of September as African Heritage Month. And
whereas the African culture and identity is vast and diverse, and through everyday intercultural exchanges, African immigrants share their languages, rituals, food, dance, art, literature, and more with communities across the nation. And
whereas the United States is home to more than 3 million African immigrants representing 54 countries. And
whereas Montgomery County is home to a large African population, making up over 16% of the overall immigrant population in our community. And
whereas we recognize African community members for their ongoing achievements and their contributions to our county's diversity with their traditions, values, and history. And
whereas the Montgomery County Council's third annual African Heritage Month commemoration theme is celebrating African changemakers who are redefining culture and community. And
whereas this year's commemoration highlights African changemakers in Montgomery County who are redefining culture and community by proudly showcasing their rich African traditions through their diverse professions. And
whereas African changemakers in Montgomery County and across the nation prove that heritage and identity can thrive in every corner of the world. And
whereas during this African Heritage Month, we not only celebrate the diversity of culture and traditions across the continent of Africa, we also learn about our shared history and what connects us globally. And
whereas we recognize the rich mosaic that is celebrated during African Heritage Month as a way of preserving the past, linking to the present, and educating future generations.
now therefore be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby proclaims September as African Heritage Month, presented on this, the 12th day of September in the year 2023. Happy African Heritage Month. And now we welcome everybody for one big family photo.